Osiris.
Under the scale, under the scale, under the scales. Under the scale, under the scale, under the scales.
Hey, so I'm very excited about this particular episode of Under the Scales. I've done one deep dive before, and that was on tapers. And if you guys will remember, because I'm not a subject matter expert in various fields, I will get an expert with me to do deep dive interviews. And today I'm extremely honored and happy to have in the Under the Scales studio in New York City with me, Dan Kanter. How are you, Dan?
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm very honored.
Oh, gosh. The honor is all mine, and I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you. Me too.
Dan's here as an expert on guitars, and if you guys hadn't figured out by now, we are going to do a deep dive into Trey Anastasio's guitars. Now, he's got a bunch. But he doesn't function as a normal multi-guitar star.
Yeah.
And I've seen you play, Dan,
sure,
on stage, and you're more like the 70s kind of guy where a song ends
and I switch
and a dude runs out with a different guitar.
Yeah, I mean, that's just to fulfill my high school fantasies, you know.
Well, it's a good one.
Because I could. But also I needed different guitars for different songs and different sounds, and so I find it fascinating that Trey gets everything he needs from his one guitar, and I'm sure, as we're going to talk about, his guitar is so unique that it just, you know, it could work as a Les Paul or work as a Strat, you know, and it's just, there's so many functions on it.
Right, and being a semi-hollow is interesting too,
yeah,
in the world of rock.
Yeah, fully hollow, his guitar.
Fully hollow? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Okay, wow. Now, so let's talk a little bit about your credentials, Dan. Why are you here as a guitar expert? And let me just fill in what I know so far. So I met Dan at a Phish show. I think it might have been Bader Field in Atlantic City.
Yeah.
Nice. And a nice guy came up to me and said that he's a big fan of Phish and my words, and started talking. And before long, I figured out that you kept referring to your boss.
Yeah.
And
my
it turns
15-year-old boss.
Yeah, it turns out that Dan Kanter's boss was Justin Bieber. So how did that happen, and what happened there? So you're his guitarist, songwriter, friend, mentor,
musical director. I was working short story, I was working in Toronto as a musical director for all these pop acts. I love playing guitar, but my dad directs musical theater. So very early on, when I was working with an artist, I couldn't help but tell them, work with them on their stage banter, working the stage, not like choreography, but just, how to be a front person, how to say Cleveland, make some noise.
And how did you know that?
Just from going to shows and seeing my dad direct, in theater. I always saw it as bigger. I love, when the band goes, but if there's like a dance move and the lights pop, all with that, that little
it makes that
accent,
so much more powerful.
It makes it so huge, and then someone in the audience really, reacts to that.
Right.
And Justin at the time, he had a song out on the radio, and he was doing a little promo tour, and he was about to do some big TV appearances, and his management thought it was time to bring someone else on who could be a guitarist, a musical mentor, eventually, grow into the role as a musical director. And fortunately, this decision happened while they were in Canada. So really just a coincidence.
That's great.
That we're both Canadian. But I think when I first met him, we really hit it off because I was the first Canadian he had hung with in a while because he was in the States. So we talked about hockey and Tim Hortons coffee and this band, The Tragically Hip, who we love in Canada.
Yeah. And also eventually Phish. You got Justin into Phish.
Well, and then Phish. Of course. Yeah.
That's a long
Everyone
story, though.
Knows me
that's down the road a little bit.
Yeah.
Because in between when you met him and getting Justin to his first Phish show, he of course became an international superstar with you right there on stage with him every single concert.
Yeah.
That's amazing, Dan.
It's unbelievable. Especially to think about it now. It was such a roller coaster. And, what a crazy trip.
Yeah, amazing. And I have to say, Dan involved me and Trey, of course, and other people from the Phish community got involved in funny ways. So, one, in a professional manner, you guys might know that Chris Kuroda did some lights for the Justin Bieber tour when he was not working for Phish. And so that was a sort of a professional thing, but more humorous. Dan invited me and, turns out, Trey to a Madison Square Garden concert. Justin Bieber, and I got to say that woman, Carly Rae Jepsen, opened. That might have been the loudest thing I've ever heard in my life. I think
everyone singing "Call Me Maybe."
Well, that, and also just the crazy bass they had there. It was like, honestly, if I didn't have, like, I normally wear earplugs even for Phish. I was just thanking my lucky stars I had them, because that was on.
You wear earplugs for Phish too?
I do. Yeah. I'll sometimes, if I'll pull them out if it's a quiet part, but for the most part, I have these special kind of wax ones that I can hear around. They're not like completely obstructive. They just bring down the decibels.
That's good.
And when you guys are 53, you'll do the same. I promise.
I wear them for everything, but not for Phish.
Okay.
Yeah, I need it all.
So I pull them out for like Karina.
That was awesome last night.
That song might just be called Karina.
Yeah, Karina.
That's a different Bob Dylan
it's a Bob Dylan
song.
on Freewheeling.
So I've seen it mislabeled, or else maybe just in my head I've mislabeled.
Yeah.
But that was a beautiful version last night.
Yeah,
so of course my earplugs were out for that.
Nice.
So what I was getting to was Dan invited me and Trey and Kuroda was doing lights, and so we were standing on this platform
and
next
your
to
daughter and Anna came.
And my daughter Anna was there, and before we knew it, I mean, I didn't know a whole heck of a lot of Justin Bieber songs, but Dan made a special welcome for us by incorporating Phish licks, at least 6 of them, into the concert. I heard, from what I remember, Maize and Sand. Right?
Yeah,
is that right?
That sounds about right.
And I think you did the Down with the Disease.
Yeah, we do that a
lot. Can you remember any others offhand?
I used to do 2001.
Oh, yes.
A lot in there. It was a challenge every show to see, which ones I could sneak in.
Is that something that someone might, be offended by? Or treating it as a joke in a way? Or is that something that Justin was completely thrilled about and happy?
Oh, he was really cool about it. I mean, we had this one. It started with this video transition for a song where I made this instrumental to go with this video piece while he was changing. And it was just sort of this thing looping in A. And I was sort of, just jamming over it. And then I figured out, I could fit Sand over it. And then I started doing it kind of as a joke just to make Kuroda laugh. And then one night I did it and Chris popped the light over my head with the dent. And I saw the lights going and I could see him laughing, and then from there we just kept doing it. But Justin knew what was going on and he thought it was great, and I mean, he understood at that point the Phish community and how it was sort of interesting to them, and at that time for him, I think he was really looking to show people, especially like other, not his fans, but other fans, that he is a very serious musician and things like that. So, I mean, he felt, I think, that it was actually mature and really fun and fishy. He kind of understood that it was fishy. But
that was great. Well, Trey was delighted every time we recognized you doing that. We looked at each other and we were like squealing, like the rest of the 14-year-old girls there.
Yeah, Mike came to a show with his family once. This is a funny one that I remember in Jersey, and so did all these Victoria's Secret models. They were all there at the same show, and so during that song, I played a lot of teases, I remember. And Justin called me down to his little quick change room, and I came down the stairs and, into his little closed dressing room. He's changing and putting on this, studded whatever. And he's like, "Are you playing more Phish teases because Mike's here tonight?" And I was like, "Are you, thrusting your hips a little more because there's 10 Victoria's Secret models?" And he's like, "You know it, Dan."
So same answer, right? That's phenomenal. So Dan and I are now set up in the second studio, and we're actually in Trey's backstage Madison Square Garden room. Yeah, and it's quite nice.
It's quite nice.
There's a guitar staring at us. Dan has
right
resisted the urge to grab it and start playing, which I'm glad he has. There's a cool amp too. Dan immediately examined the amp as well. But it occurred to me, Dan, that I forgot to ask you an important question that I was going to ask you, is that you had played on stage with Mike and John Fishman at one point. Can you tell us how that happened and what transpired?
Yeah, sure. It was in Chicago, the year of the Harpua the Right Way. And, the first night it got canceled halfway through the show. There was like a crazy rainstorm during set break. And then
Is that an indoor-outdoor venue?
Outdoor.
Oh, okay.
And then they came on, I think they played Disease, pretty sure, and then they said sorry, we have to, or during Caspian maybe something, they had to cancel.
They got a few songs out and then quit.
Caspian actually.
So shortest Phish concert ever, maybe.
Maybe I'm sure Biz Archive could tell you on Twitter.
Definitely.
And anyway, my wife and I and my brother-in-law Jack had a plan to go with Mike to see some blues acts after the show. So we were backstage and the show ended and we went on his bus and we went to these blues bars. It was amazing. Saw some incredible players. And then he told me that he was meeting up with Fishman at Second City to do this improv set and they needed a guitar player. Would I be interested in playing guitar?
So to paint the picture a little bit more detailed, this is, when you say an improv set, you're talking about in front of a live audience.
In front of a live audience at Second City, Chicago.
And you were unrehearsed?
This was like 1 a.m.
You were completely unrehearsed?
Yeah. Oh, entirely. And we got there and we met the cast, who were all wonderful, such sweet people. I mean, that's probably why they invited them to do the Harpua, because they're just hilarious and great people.
Right.
And we went on stage and it started, someone would shout out something like they would in improv. So they would say, horny. And then we would have to play this like 4-minute horny, jam inspired by the word horny. And and then we'd quiet down and the cast would come out and do a skit.
Horny, I'm thinking like there's a wah-wah involved.
And it was a blast, It was such an amazing opportunity, and I was laughing for a lot of it, but it wasn't lost on me that how exciting it was to play with Mike and Fish, and just to see how tight they are. I mean, as a rhythm section, and I've noticed that every time I listen to Fish, but to actually be playing and soloing over them, it was just unreal.
Must have been delightful.
Their connection that they have.
Oh yeah, wow! Years and years of playing together.
Oh my gosh!
And then suddenly you were able to sort of build upon that foundation.
Yeah, I mean, it helped
cool.
because we were everything was so off the cuff.
Right.
At least they.
In a way, though, like despite no matter how great they are, you were the melody. Like you had to come up with stuff off the cuff.
Yeah, which was fun.
Well, maybe you're good at that sort of thing.
But those guys
awesome.
are,
That's
really.
Awesome.
I guess they're off the cuff. Anyway, I mean, I've heard through the grapevine that they don't know any of the songs.
Well, the way
going on stage.
Now that's funny. We can ask, Trey when he shows up.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. If we stray from the topic of guitars, because that's something. The set list itself is a topic for exploration.
So many questions.
But the way that, in my mind, is that, and I'm not 100% sure of this now that you say it, but I have a feeling that Mike and Fish don't know the songs before Trey tells them on stage.
Yeah.
Which is pretty intense.
So being in a at Second City, just improv, they were very comfortable. They were in their own space. Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to press pause here and wait for Trey to show up.
I'm going to stare at the guitar and pick it up.
He's inching closer on the couch to the guitar. And we should say for the record, it is which guitar?
It's Old Reliable, number 1.
It's number 1 with the middle
single coil in the middle.
Coil. Yep.
Yeah.
So this is the Grateful Dead 50 guitar.
That is the GD50 guitar. Yeah, totally.
All right. There you have it. This is part 2 of the deep dive into Trey's guitars. And we're sitting here, Dan and I, with, of course, Trey Anastasio. Thank you for inviting us into your...
Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, well, thank you.
Of everything about you. I have been for years. I think I'm your oldest fan.
What did you say?
I was your fan in 4th grade.
What did you are. What did you say about me when you welcomed me onto stage as Bruce Springsteen? Like,
oh my God,
one of my favorite influences as a New Jersey songwriter. It was really great.
Oh, you had to remind me of that. That was like another inside joke backstage that we didn't have the wisdom to leave backstage. We
right.
thought it would be just as funny. We were laughing so hard backstage. We thought it would be just as funny to everyone else, including all of the crew
stage
guys and
hands.
local crew hands and maintenance guys from New Jersey.
Well, there's
Somehow, once again, probably interpreted that as us making fun of Bruce Springsteen, who we both idolize.
Right.
You know what I mean? It
Yeah.
wasn't that at all.
It wasn't that at all.
I'm wondering, as soon as it started, I thought,
why did I do that?
why did we do this? That used to happen more. I think our filter has become better.
Yeah.
I mean, because like even that, I don't even want to bring this one up. There's so many of them that I cringe.
Give me a hint.
Even that, you know, song playing over and over on the radio, "Shine,"
Oh,
which I
right.
still feel bad about.
Dan and I were
We were
just
just talking about that.
That's one of his favorite
I
bands.
love
I love that song. We both were like, you know, rocking
Yeah.
out to it and singing it in the car on the stereo, and it wasn't supposed to be. The joke backstage, it used to happen so quickly, regularly,
Right.
that we'd be laughing backstage and we would just go right on stage and do one of those things.
Right.
The Bruce Springsteen one is a perfect example.
That is right.
where
No, but-
he had a multiple show run
and
somewhere,
he had a break.
and he had a night off.
Yeah, he was in New Jersey at the Meadowlands.
He was at the Meadowlands.
Yeah, and he had a night off, and it was perfect for you to say. And I think they sowed the seeds earlier among the. There was a group videoing, and they were attached to the this was at the time called Garden State Art Center,
Right.
The stagehands. So the rumor was rife that Bruce Springsteen
That's what happened.
could possibly be a visitor.
That's what
tomorrow
happened.
night.
We showed up for sound check, and everybody was like, "Oh, I hear Bruce is going to sit in tonight." And we were like, "Yeah, right, sure,
Oh, sure,
or whatever."
Tom, you
And
spread some seeds.
we were just laughing.
I did.
And
I
then,
did.
and then we were in the band room, and I started riffing on, "Ladies and gentlemen, my favorite New Jersey songwriter.
Yeah,
I grew up loving his
this guy
music.
this guy
influenced me in the course of my life. You know, he's a musician, a songwriter who changed the course of my life, probably more than any other."
And then you said, "Ladies and gentlemen,
Ladies and gentlemen, New Jersey's favorite son, Tom Marshall.
He's been with me through my whole life. And he also, of course, is a New Jersey native and somebody that's really excited to play for. That's right. One of the great songwriters of our time. So would you please put a warm welcome for the great songwriter, New Jersey's favorite son, ladies and gentlemen.
Not cool.
It was so funny backstage.
It was all right. I pulled off an okay version of.
But then I remember looking at the like, you know, the local Jersey stagehands,
They were pissed.
and then realizing that they didn't get,
No, they
you
didn't.
know, it was
Yeah.
kind of three levels of humor that why would they
Why would
why would they
Right,
ever
right.
get it? And,
Trey,
they were
even
kind of
more-
grimacing with their arms crossed.
Right,
it's just,
and
oh
there's
my
another
God.
reason for the grimace. So the night before, I had played my welcome. What's it called? I had overextended the power of the all access pass.
Probably in the case of beer.
Well,
I'm guessing.
no. So I brought.
Whatever the story's
so
going.
there's a case of beer in this story. Is that what you said?
I'm sure there is.
There isn't. A thing of water fell from above because. Of
Oh, you went up in the. I heard about
Yeah,
that.
so I went. So basically, I took two of my friends. We were standing in the audience watching a great Phish show. This was the night before Bruce Springsteen, and my friend looked up behind us and saw this spot where there's some spotlights.
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh yeah, I can get us up there." So we went up,
Yeah.
and this was
And you showed your pass to get up there.
this was actually right at set break.
Uh-huh.
We went up. And yeah, I had to all access my way up. And it actually wasn't the easiest way up. It was sort of like stairs for a while, and then it became like a ladder and a hatch. And then there's a reason they don't want people there, is because it was sort of this weird slatted floor where you could thread cables down to the stage if you needed to. And it was sort of treacherous, and there were spools of high tension cable everywhere, holding all the shit up.
Yeah.
above the band. I mean, like,
my
there's
God.
so many reasons not to be up there. And out of my friend's back pocket slipped a thing of water, and it landed on stage next to a crew member, one of the local guys. And so, long story short, we snuck down or my two friends snuck down before the encore, and I stayed. And then by the time I went down, they grabbed me, and they really grabbed me. And they were, because one of my friends got away clean. The next one sort of had to wiggle away. And by the time I came down, they were fucking ready. And I don't know what they were going to do to me, but they were dragging me toward sort of the bus area.
Yeah.
And Brad stepped in.
Wow.
Brad kind of walked in. It was amazing. I was so grateful for him at that moment, because I felt I was being dragged to be pounded.
You might have been.
To be beaten up. And
That was probably payback for all the times you got away, because you, in the past, it was like karmic payback, because you, more than any of my other friends when we were growing up, used to always get
Escape.
away with stuff that anyone else would have gotten caught.
But I never karmically
And I always
left
got
anyone.
caught. I always got
But I never
caught.
left anyone for a pounding.
No, but that pounding was like, karmic revenge for
Retribution.
all the times that you got away, because you always got away, and I always got caught for anything we did. Like, I couldn't lie my way out of a paper bag or whatever. And the best one was when we were in middle school, I think, or middle school, early high school or something, 8th, 9th grade, and you were walking through the hallway. And you used to always do this thing, Tom used to always do this thing where it was like this little game that was played whenever we would walk by the fire alarm. He would go, sort of tap it with his hands and go ah! And tap the fire alarm, and then, because pulling the fire alarm was something you never did.
Yeah, I know.
And he wouldn't pull it. He would just kind of tap on
I
it.
would rattle it.
He'd rattle it.
I could rattle it. Yeah.
Rattle the fire alarm, and we'd all laugh and walk by. So one time, he was walking by the fire alarm, and he just went, digga, and rattled it, and it just fell open.
This particular one didn't have a spring.
Yeah.
It just actually fell open.
It just fell open, and it was bam, 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 the fire alarm's off. And then fire trucks came, and the whole school's emptied out, and the fire guys are walking through the school. Big, huge, at that age, that's not something you do. And it was like an immediate suspension or expulsion or something for pulling the fire alarm. And Tom pulled the fire alarm. He didn't mean to, but how you can explain that? Right. And apparently there were some kids in the lower school who saw him do it. So
They
we
saw
all
a
went
tall
out.
guy with glasses, thank God. And I didn't back then have glasses. They said a tall guy with glasses.
But everyone in the school knew it was you. This is the part that amazes me.
Yes.
And let me, because this will say so much about you, I'll add to your podcast. This is the part that amazes me. Everybody knew it was Tom. So it was over, they let everybody back in, and they called Tom into the office the next day. And, it was the headmaster and the assistant headmaster and all these top people. And they're like, okay, we knew you did it. You got two choices. You either admit it right now and you'll be suspended, or you don't admit it and you're going to be expelled. And Tom was like, I didn't do it. Just right?
Yeah.
Didn't they keep calling you back in there?
Basically like that, yeah.
And just grilling you? They're like, we know you did it, and now you're expelled.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, well, it was never the headmaster, but
who
the
was it?
headmaster's son. Right before I went in, said, "We know you did it." Yeah. But then the headmaster himself said, "Tom, we've narrowed it down to maybe possibly 4 people, and you're obviously you're in the running, big time in the running." And I just kind of somewhere in my head, had I come out early and said I accidentally did this, it would have been great. But after now a week investigation of saying it wasn't me, I just finally couldn't backtrack on that. So I just had to go. And
I remember that. It was
Bold-faced
the
lie.
horror was palpable at the time. That
It was
everybody knew. I remember going to everyone knew you did it,
Yeah.
and you just kept going in and saying, I didn't do it.
didn't do it.
You can't prove it. And they couldn't.
I didn't say you can't prove it. I just said I didn't do it. That was because I knew it was down to about 4 people, and no one could really pin down their whereabouts.
And eventually it just
It faded.
ended.
It faded, and I didn't get expelled.
Nothing happened.
Nothing happened.
Hopefully they
You
don't
just
listen to your
lied your way
podcast.
out.
Now they're don't
And
listen.
in contrast, when I was after I went to the next school, there was this Chinese history class that I was in, and the professor, who was the headmaster, it was seniors only, like pre-college, like high level, whatever. And he used to walk out of the room and let everybody and do the hand out a test and walk out of the room. And somewhere near the end, right when college applications were going in and stuff like that, one day he came and he said, "We're going to do one more test," and it was a surprise test, and everybody was all upset. And he walked out of the room, and the entire class,
Cheated.
except maybe one person, like one girl, just opened up their books and started like blatantly cheating. We used to sit around a table, and everyone was like just blatantly cheating.
Right.
And I joined in with the cheating side, and
Yes.
there were like maybe two people didn't cheat.
Right.
So, like a couple of weeks later, we went to class. We sat down. The headmaster walked in, shut the door.
Oh, no.
And he said, "We know what happened. We're taking you one by one into my office before you even have a chance to talk about what happened, and everybody who cheated is going to be expelled."
Oh my God!
Right?
Expelled.
Yeah, it was. So I went in there just like you did, and they said, "We know you did it." And I was just like, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I did it." And I just, like,
You broke too soon.
I can't lie like that. I don't know.
You can't.
So, okay. Then, after it was all, I just assumed everybody was busted. When it was over, there were two other people out of like 14
That said they did it.
who had confessed.
Wow.
And the three of us we didn't get expelled. We got suspended, and we had to come over vacation and do maintenance work. It was like a big deal.
You got in major
Everybody
trouble.
else, everybody who lied just got off.
Skated.
And everybody who came Dan,
So what lesson do you find in that?
I learned to try to be a better liar. Tell your children, parents. Seriously.
Oh no!
You better learn how to lie.
Dan has young kids now.
do.
Teach them.
Yeah. You've given me
Let
lots of
them
good
lie.
advice about parenthood. This is not
that's
one
what
of
that
those
song is
moments.
This isn't one of those.
That's what Let Me Lie is about.
Let me lie.
Now you know. You think it's about a bike,
Yeah.
but it's not.
God.
Wow. To get back to the podcast topic,
Okay.
which I would love to do.
Topcast.
I'd love to talk forever about stuff like this.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. But we really do. We have a lot of questions for you regarding
Good.
guitars.
Ready.
And
Love.
your guitar,
Love.
it kind of, as far as Paul Languedoc goes, it started right with the guitar you're
Yes.
holding right now.
Well, it started before that.
Time guitars.
Paul worked for a company called Time Guitars. It wasn't his company. And I'm going to say right now, and I'll probably say it again, hey, Paul, if you're listening, if I get anything wrong, my apologies. I love Paul.
Well, I
always loved Paul. He was my roommate, and I'll tell you all that. So I'll do the best that I can to get it as accurate
really
as possible.
quickly, since you brought that up, let me just mention that Dan and I fully intend, if Paul wants us to talk to him. And in fact, we wanted to do such a deep dive that we thought we would work our way up to you, and then suddenly just learned that, well, why don't you just talk to Trey?
Right, yeah.
But I don't want to miss Paul in that process at
Okay,
all.
great. Well, so Paul was around Burlington, and he worked for a company called Time Guitars. Shortly after I got there in the early '80s. Okay, let me get this straight. I bought a Time guitar. So if you listen to some of the really early Phish, there's the white tape, the white album, has this sort of Strat sounding guitar on it. That was a Time guitar. It's a very
It's a
Stratty sounding.
three-quarter scale guitar.
Yeah.
Wicka chicka kind of Strat. No, that's not that. This was a Strat.
And this is after your Ibanez?
Yeah, I had an Ibanez,
Was that your
which I
first?
loved.
Was that your first guitar?
I had, when I was in high school, my first guitar.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll just go right to the beginning. When I started learning guitar, I learned classical guitar first, which was a great thing. And so my first guitar was a rented classical nylon string.
Yeah.
And that was great, that I had a great guitar teacher, and he was like, listen, you should learn classical guitar before you ever even think about getting an electric guitar. So I learned Bach gavottes, finger style, and it was a rented nylon string that, like a student guitar.
Sure.
And then I wanted an electric guitar, and I got an Ibanez sort of Sunburst. Okay,
When that was
in high
Les
school.
Paul style.
That was a Les Paul style guitar, and it was a musician, Ibanez musician.
Right.
Yeah.
I remember it well.
That was a great guitar.
And
I had
why that guitar?
that. I can't remember. It was kind of
Like two
two
humbuckers. Like
humbuckers.
Is it like-
yeah, I didn't know enough then to know any better.
yeah.
To be perfectly honest, I'm just trying to really do the. I think I went to a music store, and it was probably I didn't have a very limited budget at the time. I'm sure my parents were probably helping me, and they probably said you could spend 100 and whatever.
Yeah.
I remember that guitar from Princeton Day School era.
Yeah.
And Steve remembers it from Taft era.
I had it at Taft.
It came up
Yeah.
to Taft with
When
you.
Steve and I were in a band called Red Tide at Taft, and that's the dude of life, Steve. I met you at PDS, where I went up through 10th grade. So we were friends from 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, all that. And then when I went to a different school, Taft, I met the dude, Steve. So you guys didn't actually know each other
Correct. Yeah.
until years later.
And we just covered this in a podcast.
Right.
Yeah.
Which makes me so happy, like,
Yeah.
that you guys became friends is like the coolest thing.
He left out Red Tide. He jumped right to Space Antelope.
It was originally called Red Tide,
Okay.
and Steve wasn't really in it at first.
Okay.
When I got there, I had the red Ibanez, and the band was called Red Tide, and we did Police, Lou Reed, songs like Vicious, You Hit Me With a Flower. It was a great band. And we did Low Spark of High Heel Boys, and I want to say one more thing, and you can edit this in. So I got this red Ibanez on 48th Street in New York. And when I was about 15 years old, I started taking guitar lessons from a guy in Manhattan. So my mom would let me take the train. I just took the train into Times Square
Wow.
once a week.
Oh, cool.
And I went to 48th Street and got the Ibanez. And this guy was sort of over by the plaza. So I would walk through Times Square. And part of the reason I'm saying that is because I was born in '64, so that would be 1979.
Wow.
And you remember what Times Square was like back then?
Was it kind of
Oh man,
seedier?
it was
more
all like porno
sex
and drug
stores,
dealers and prostitutes walking around. It was crazy in the '70s. I just remember I loved it. I loved coming into the city to take my guitar lessons and walk through Times Square and look at all these.
That's why you knew the city so well. Like, of
Yeah.
all our friends, I was kind of like afraid of the city.
It was
But
kind
when I
of
was
crazy
with,
back then.
When I was with you or Peter Catoni, I always felt like you guys were good tour guides.
My mom, grew up in the city.
Oh, okay.
Like she went to high school at PS6
Yeah.
on the east side, and
Yeah.
she's a lifetime New Yorker, so
Oh,
she
okay.
always encouraged me to go into the city from a very young age. And I
Right.
took these guitar lessons as about 15 years old,
Nice.
and I bought that Ibanez.
Okay.
They gave me money or something, or I had a summer job or something like that.
Right. The funny thing is, so that was sort of invisible to a lot of your friends, and a lot of them, if you ask them, kind of don't remember how all of a sudden you went from drummer to guitarist.
Right.
And
Well-
that's kind of funny. There's like this transition, like boom, suddenly Trey knew how to play guitar. But there were classical lessons. There was hidden New York lessons that no one really knew about.
Right.
Awesome.
I used to play a lot. I practiced a lot too.
You sure did.
A lot. So I just really liked playing the guitar
Yeah.
at an early age, and
Who were your early guitar heroes?
my early guitar heroes? That's a really good question. Well, number one by far was Jimmy Page, which sort of, I don't know why, it kind of that, when I do interviews with guitar mags and stuff, that gets forgotten. Tom might remember that I had something like 50 Led Zeppelin posters in my room. My whole entire room was,
Wow.
this is when I was like 12.
Yeah.
It was all Led Zeppelin posters. And my first job, I worked at the Princeton Record Exchange, and I worked for records. And that guy used to call the guy who owns the Princeton Record Exchange, which is now a big store. At the time, it was me and him. I was the only employee,
Wow.
and I would stack records and stuff like that. And he would give me Led Zeppelin bootlegs. And he used to call me Led Zeppelin. He's like, "Hey, Led Zeppelin, here's another bootleg. Now clean, like sweep the floor." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But so that was the number one influence, without question, for quite some time. And
Yeah.
then Steve Howe.
Yeah.
I love. Yes, we used to listen to those. Santana.
Yeah.
Dwayne. All those guys. Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah.
Disraeli Gears was one of the first records I ever bought. Cream. And this is again still at 440 Walnut Lane. So this was we moved to the new house in like 6th grade.
Yeah.
So this is like 4th or 5th grade.
Right.
I had Disraeli Gears.
Well, I remember you, to me, the Dwayne, yes, in terms of what you listened to, totally Zeppelin is what I remember.
Right.
But in terms of how you played, I always felt there was some sort of Southern Dwayne-y thing happening there.
I listened to a lot of
because even
like
I Am Hydrogen in one of our earliest things, that's Dwayne. To me, you were in a Dwayne kick.
Yeah. And again, I don't know why that doesn't
Blue
come
Sky,
up
you
anymore.
were playing that song Blue Sky over and over and over again.
I used to listen to somehow, maybe I got it from, maybe my parents had it or something, but I got the Fillmore East record at some point.
Cool.
Oh, wow.
And
Eat a Peach, you had.
Yep.
Sweet.
So those guys and
So from the Ibanez.
so anyway, so I got that Ibanez, and then I went to Taft, and we had this band Red Tide,
Right.
which eventually
Steve started
Steve kind of joined in, and we it was like a bunch of people, and then it sort of morphed into, right when we were seniors, it sort of morphed into our band, and it became the Space Antelope thing.
Nice.
It was cool though. There's still people who have tapes. That band was, for a high school band, not so bad. We played Rush.
Wow.
We used to play the drummer was really into Neil Peart. We'd play Rush songs, and it was pretty all over the map.
Dan's playing Limelight with.
I'm interviewing Alex.
Wow.
Next month.
He would be on my list. I used
Yeah.
to listen to those guys a lot. I mean, it's weird. I listen to everything. I didn't have a lot of.
Yeah.
I mean, I still kind of do, but I really
You
listen
do.
to everything. I never had a genre that I was.
Yeah. I mean, every time we've talked, you're into like musicals, D'Angelo, this, that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still like that. I mean, and it
I can't keep up with Trey ever. I never have been able to musically.
Yeah.
I is it because, although I don't think you're not, let me rephrase what I'm trying to say. When I hear someone, I dive so deeply into them that I feel like I exclude others. Whereas you listen to everyone, and yet I think you're not doing surface dives either. You're doing deep dives, but just into way, way more people.
Right.
I don't know how you have the time for that.
I mean, I still love listening to music. I still listen to music a lot.
Yeah.
So
You also always Trey had this amazing ability of kind of listening to a song once, and even when we're writing, and knowing the lyrics and knowing the songs and the changes. Like, that was sort of like this almost supernatural ability you've always kind of had.
thank God now that we have
Intense.
300 and whatever songs to remember. It's very strange too if you try to remember that stuff.
Yeah.
If I try to remember it, I forget it.
Well, that brings to mind a set list question that I don't even know the answer to. I wonder if we even want to go here. But do you write a set list, show it to Paige? You kind of come up with a set list before a concert, show a couple song ideas to Paige, and then throw it away?
Yeah. Well, I don't write a set list. What I do is, here's exactly what I do. Not to.
I think it's interesting. Let's hear it.
It is. Well, you'll see in front of you that on the table. That's every single song Phish plays, including covers, some of which we haven't played in 20 years and stuff like that.
So that might be 400
So when I
songs in
wake
there?
up in the morning, this whole thing is habitual, and it's kind of been, because we're the band that talks about everything, there've been many, many conversations about, do you want me to do this? With the guys, and yes, they want me to do it. And I'm not overstepping any bounds or anything, right? But so I wake up in the morning and I have my coffee, and I read through the song list, the whole song list, and I circle songs without thinking, just really like mixing the coffee and drinking
And you're not worried about like whether Phish played this song last time we were here. You're not doing
No.
that kind of analysis.
No.
Yet. Okay.
Unless Well, unless somebody, unless I'm talking to you or one of my friends or something, and they're like, "Oh, I was in the parking lot and everybody wants to hear X."
Oh, okay.
Then I'll put
Colonel
that down.
Forbin.
So then I circle all these songs, and it ends up being, I did it right before I came here tonight because we were talking back at Madison Square Garden backstage, and it ends up being about like 100 songs.
Wow.
Now, some of the choices are because I know, because I'm in constant contact with the other guys, like, oh, let's play Mound. And then Paige says, can you give me like a week on Mound because I'm with my kids and I don't want to mess it up again. And I'm going to, if I don't practice it. It's,
Wow.
The middle of Mound is really hard.
Yes.
And he says, can you take that one off the list, please? So then I take it off the list. Or Phish says, I'd love to do Demand, but the drum part is a written part. I really need a couple days. Or sometimes it's even simpler songs that, I wanted to do. I circled, not too long ago, what's that song that Mike sings? Zither, Rachel, Cardamom.
Mock
Frost?
song.
Yeah.
That's Mock song, I think.
Mock song. I love that song.
Yeah.
It's like one of my favorite Mike
That's
songs.
a great song,
And
yeah.
Mike kind of said, I'd really like to know the lyrics.
That one's hard to get the lyrics right.
Yeah, he's just like, I'm going to forget the lyrics. Can you just not put that on the list? So it gets crossed off.
Right.
Zither, Rachel, Cardamom, Frost. But at what cost? Threshold skin, fortress wind. A life of sin, pliers, tension, toy store grace. The human race, breaking 14 basket screw.
So then the list ends up being about, it's like a whole page with small font, right?
Yeah.
It's not 300, but it's 80 for the night.
Right.
And I quickly text that or email it to Richard, our tour manager. So then when I arrive at the venue, he hands me that. And we go up on stage for sound check. And then at sound check, I'm kind of like, well, you guys like these? Or, what do you... And then we'll say, oh, I really want to do Waking Up Dead, but I really don't want to do it unless we run it. So, for instance, last night I said, oh, let's do Home, the new song by Paige.
Yes.
Which I love.
Right.
And then we forgot to run it in sound check.
Oh, okay.
And then it was on the list for last night. And he came into my band room and he's like, I don't want to do that unless we run it. I don't want to
okay.
go up and mess up Home.
Okay, good.
So could you just take it off?
Right.
And it goes off.
I
So
see.
there's a dialogue happening, but at
Yeah.
the same time, it's...
But you're
Um,
still maintaining the list.
Yeah. Then
Okay.
when I walk on stage, I go on. This probably by the time we go on stage for the first set, it's probably down to like 30,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
Even though the rule is, of course, everything is fair game. So we walk on stage at 30, but we make 100% sure to not know what song we're going to start with when we walk on.
Oh my
There's
God.
ideas, but and this has become much easier than I can't even plan it anymore. It's too much thinking and too much work. But so it's kind of like almost like martial arts in the sense that we go on stage without a set list, but that's not really exactly true.
Okay.
What happens is that there's a lot of
There's thinking behind the scenes.
discussion in order
Yeah.
to forget.
That's
Like,
so
we don't
great.
just go on with nothing.
Right.
You know what I mean? But that's kind of, that system has developed over years where, we'll go to catering or something and there'll be like 30 and 4 copies get sent to the band members.
Okay.
And Paige might walk by and be like, oh my God, I love that song.
Okay.
And then I register that in my mind. Oh,
see.
Paige loves that song. Good. Or, you know what I mean?
Right.
Or, Mike says, or if, I'm like, ass-handed. And Fish is like, oh, I want to sing ass-handed. So now I know. So I'm still sort of the one who,
You're
but-
maintaining the master copy in a way.
in my
before the
mind,
show.
partially in
Right.
my mind, like those little comments stick in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And no. Then we go on stage and I just forget. So then last night we were playing some jam and we're just, and like all of a sudden we were like in F. And-
Yeah.
and which is simple.
Simple, yeah.
And simple wasn't like on the list or anything. Like there was no list.
It's just answered.
But we were just playing it.
Yeah.
So then now you're playing simple. So then most of the decisions are made based on what you just played before.
Yeah.
Like if you did a big blah 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 song, like then it usually feels like, oh, I gotta sing something, and then it's very obvious what the next song's supposed to be.
Nice.
So there's like a process during the day, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But the process leads to as much improv in the song list as
Right.
sometimes somebody's got on a sign. A lot of times the sign thing only works. The sign thing usually works like a day later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Again, because
It's because you have already put in a little bit of a lot of thinking.
the songs that trip you up now are the simple ones.
Right.
Funnily enough,
Oh, okay.
it's not necessarily It's Ice that throws you.
Oh.
Even though It's Ice was easier when we played it more
Is that
often.
because like a
it's
Brian and Robert or
Exactly.
Dirt are
Exactly.
they sound very easy, and you kind of put them in the back of your head like, oh yeah, we know that.
And then you get to the B section and you're like, is there a B section? or somebody's kind of like, what? The simpler ones are kind of without running them once.
Right.
And people's lives are busy, so
Yep.
Do you ever stack two songs because you know you're going to end, let's say, in D, and then you could go right into
no.
run
Ru-
away? You know.
I did.
Yeah.
Earlier, like in 95 or I used to be much more like when we started playing 4 nights at the Garden,
Uh-huh.
I planned the whole thing out.
Mm.
And just because it was too overwhelming,
Yeah.
the idea of not
Sure.
repeating songs for that amount of time.
Yeah.
And also not like saving all the good ones for one, accidentally saving all the good ones for one show or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
But
Yeah. And what are good ones? What does that mean?
that's the other thing is that I will tell you another little
Good point.
trick about that's kind of funny is that I used to have a part of my brain that would save, like we've got 3 more nights here, let's save a big song.
The
And
big,
then
right.
this was like about 5 years ago or something, after we kind of came back, I realized that if you just keep it in one set, and it's like, we're going to play the best songs tonight. This is going to write the best song for the moment.
Yeah.
The next couple nights end up being even better. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there is no best song. It's,
Right.
it's exactly what you're saying. As a matter of fact, it's kind of
You can't
counterintuitive.
Yeah. It's sort of the opposite of
It's the opposite. Like, you think,
arrangement
this
we
is the
have
big
with you,
song.
Phish.
We're going to play the big song.
Yeah.
And then
You know?
it's not the big song that was actually the big song.
That's
and it's
that's amazing.
everybody's kind of. It's pretty mysterious. I'm not trying to be like hippie guy or anything, but it is mysterious, and it's like you know. There's a way to get to a point where the no thinking thing,
Yeah.
even
Yeah.
though I'm talking about writing,
Yeah.
I try to keep that all the way back to the beginning of that story with the coffee. Like, I don't know why. I'm just kind of go really quickly and
Yep.
before I can think about it, circling
Yeah.
these songs on the list.
You've always tried to pull from from the ether,
Yeah.
your ideas, whether it's a set list
Or when we're songwriting.
or it's a new song.
Right.
So you're getting those kind of from the same place. That's
Yeah,
neat.
just like staying in the moment and just kind of, because it
great.
feels because it feels right.
Well,
I don't know.
it works, and it's as much of being an artist as writing a song or playing a song.
Probably.
Is coming up with the right order to make the shows work.
Like, I love.
You have a theory about this?
No, I know we're supposed to talk about guitars, but I have another question about set list. Do you, when you're playing a new song,
Yeah.
which I think, even though this is a different type of audience, you know, it still, I would say, challenges the audience more than like a old classic song.
Yeah.
Do you consciously try to ever sandwich? Like when I see Elton John, for example, he'll play, you know, Benny and the Jets, and
And then
he'll
a new
say,
song.
"Hey, here's a new song," and then after the new song, he's like, "Thanks for listening to that. Here's Tiny Dancer."
I don't feel that way.
Is that
no.
ever? No.
I get what you're saying. That's a good question. I really don't feel that way. I feel more.
Or are they all just even playing field?
Well, I mean, like, maybe it's from. Like, our problem has been too many available songs, not it's not a problem. But I love new songs, and
Yeah.
as Tom will attest, here we are together. But we love writing together,
Yeah.
and I love writing, and so like, what's a new song? Like right now, you know, Blaze On or No Men or you know, Fuego, or I suppose those are new songs, but they feel the freshest to me, and I like them so much, and I know the other guys do.
Yeah.
A lot. We like playing those songs a lot right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't feel the element to the story that you just told is an element of apology. Thanks for listening.
Yeah.
I don't feel that at all.
That's great.
Not at all.
Uh-huh.
I also kind of feel like I'm sure Elton John is in a different situation where his fans, probably see him once in their life.
Yeah.
If not twice. He being, the greatest, one of the greatest songwriters of all time, and somebody that I absolutely just adore and idolize his music.
Same.
But
You're right.
when
you
I walk
don't
on
see 'em a
stage,
lot.
I
Right.
see a lot of the same people,
Yeah.
and I feel like I'm walking
Yes.
into a room full of friends.
Totally.
I mean, really, you were there last night. I mean, I know so many people that were there last night.
Yeah.
And so I know, how many times have you seen Tom, Mike's song?
At least 50.
At least 50 times.
Yeah.
And like in contrast, you're going to see Elton John. How many times have you seen Elton John?
0, which is
And
exactly
I want to.
your point.
I've seen him 0 too,
Yeah.
and I really want to.
I
can't-
really want to.
One day I will see him.
Me too.
And when I do, I really hope he plays "Someone Saved My Life Tonight."
Nice.
Because I
love
love
that
that
song.
song.
Yeah.
Same.
And
Yeah.
that'll be great.
Yeah.
So he's got a different situation
Yeah.
than me.
You're right.
And even in the world of like bands that kind of, like improvisational rock bands.
Yeah.
I have a friend of mine who's a huge Allman Brothers fan, and he finally got to see the Allman Brothers at the Beacon.
Huh.
And I said, "How was it?" And he said, "They didn't play Whipping Post, and
Ugh.
I just wanted to see Whipping Post,
Oh,
and I kept
no.
going, Whipping Post!" I was kind of like, well, they probably played like 28
Yeah.
straight nights, they might have played it. And he's like, "I know, but
Yeah.
I've been wanting to see them my whole life, and they didn't play Whipping Post."
I'm happy to hear that you don't think like that. 'cause
Oh, man.
For me,
The opposite.
working in the pot world, I think why I got so heavy into Phish was it was the opposite of that. There's
Right.
so much thought and over analyzing, and these devices that like work. And I totally agree. When Elton John does that, it feels to me almost like more of an apology
Right.
than he's proud of the song.
I feel like-
I'm happy to hear you don't do that.
Yeah.
No, not at all. Actually, what I'm looking forward to, what I look forward to more is to have. We used to do these shows with Phish. There's some of my favorite shows. There are at least 3 of them that I can remember, where we played like 14 new songs.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's one in Lowell at this
Yeah.
pro-choice benefit or something.
Yeah.
It was like-
And who was there? It was a woman was there.
yeah.
She turned out to be a fan of Theme from the Bottom.
Yeah.
oh, gosh.
Gloria Steinem.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Gloria.
Was there, and I think we did one in Providence once where we played like 6 songs from Rift, and
Cool.
the difference between those are my favorite shows.
Yeah.
And I'll say another thing. I did a show up in Vermont once. It was called the 8 Foot Fluorescent Tubes, and it was the opening night of Higher Ground Club, or opening weekend. I think there might have been 2 weeks. So Kevin Staitzer, who started that club, asked me if I would play the first Saturday night, and I said sure, but it's got to be a whole new band with a new name, and I want to write all new music. And he said okay. So we came out, and there was this put together band. It was Russ and Tony and Tom Lawson,
Yeah.
and a lot of your lyrics, Tom, and then a lot of songs that were written with like me and Russ. And it was First Tube was the first song because it was the 8 Foot Fluorescent Tube. So that was the first time we ever played. It was the First Tube was the opening song of the Tube concert.
Yeah.
And we had props, and it was like a show, right? There was like a curtain with lights and dancers who had 8 Foot fluorescent tubes in their hands,
Yeah.
plugged in.
Behind the sheets at first,
Behind
and then the
sheets.
sheets popped open. Yeah, it was
And then
cool.
the sheets popped open when it goes major.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
was
And then we
really
did
cool.
Sand for the first time ever.
Oh, yeah.
That was the first time that it ever got played.
Yes.
And all these other songs And that was so fun to me. And maybe it's coming from a family that went and saw, like shows in New York, theatrical shows, and you go in, you don't know what you're going to see. So I like playing new songs.
Yeah.
Ready for a segue? You guys in the podcasting world? What guitar were you playing there, Trey?
Okay. I will tell you that. I'll finish this sentence and then we'll go right into this.
Sorry.
What I look forward to is a little more time to rehearse. Right?
Yeah.
So, as you know, there's always a lot of new songs. And what we used to have with Phish that's a little more precious today is we live together. And so we could rehearse and we could go out and play foam or something like that. Now everybody's kind of in their lives and it's a lot harder. Now here's an interesting story about who I lived with at the time, Tom, when we all lived together. My roommate was Paul Languedoc.
Aha.
Who built my guitar.
Coincidentally or not
coincidentally. Would you like to talk about guitars?
Yeah. Wow, what a great segue. So that was a better segue, by the way, than mine. So next week, we'll conclude this first deep dive into Trey's guitars with a new episode in which we don't stray off topic as much as we did this time. For those of you staying up to date, part 2 of this deep dive will be released on Monday, February 13th. I need to thank everyone I met in Mexico who had so many nice things to say to me about the Under the Scales podcast. It's very gratifying to hear and meet the actual people listening and learn what you like or what you recommend about the podcast, so thank you. I met so many nice new friends on the beach and shared tequila shots with some of you at Ulysses Bar near the adult pool. Lots of fun. We're constantly going to be changing, as you'll see. 2017 will be a big year for Under the Scales. We're working on episodes with a more audience-featured format. We have some amazing guests lined up. We're also going to be timing some episodes to coincide with certain events. More on that later. And lastly, I'm still contacting people even months after you submitted an idea to me, so please don't stop. If you have a topic in mind or want me to interview you, please click the Tell Your Story button at underthescales.com. Someone will get back to you if it's something that we're going to be able to do. Thank you, and I'll be back with Trey and Dan next week on Under the Scales.